Welcome back to Spincast, ladies and gentlemen. My name once again is Keegan, or Keegabyte, and today I am joined by Arcadia Esports, Timothy Belloff and Bill Rogers, two of the people representing that program. If you two would tell me a little bit about yourselves to our audience as well, so we can get to know you a little bit. Timothy, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I'm Timothy Belloff. I'm the director of esports at Arcadia. Been in the position a little over a year now, and brainstormed the idea of doing this a couple years back now, and was able to get it kind of off the ground. I also hold the role of director of academic technology at the university, and I teach a seminar at the university on video games.
Well, that's awesome. How about you, Bill? What do you do for Arcadia Esports?
My name is Bill Rogers. My in-game name is Lesamos. I am the assistant director of esports at Arcadia, as well as the head Hearthstone coach. I have a pretty extensive career in the Hearthstone community. I've done some commentating, casting, worked for some tournament organizers there. Top 10 legend finish, got to put that out there too.
Nice.
Yeah, proud of that one still holding on to that one. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do. The assistant director job is my main gig right now.
So tell me a little bit about your program. How do you have it set up? Because we know that a lot of other universities, they have it set up sometimes under the comp sci program, under athletics. Sometimes it's just a student club. So how exactly is the esports program at Arcadia University organized and integrated into the university curriculum as a whole?
So I guess back in spring of 2018, we kind of got together. There were some ideas of throwing around esports, and a couple different people had started bringing it up. And it was one of the things that I brought up, and I shopped the idea a little bit to our athletic director. And I said, hey, what have you thought of? And he's like, well, funny enough, it just kind of came up, and the conversation kind of organically grew from there. And we started to involve other people, and planning sessions came about. We implemented an advisory board to help us to kind of come up with ideas and how this could potentially work, which includes faculty, staff, students, alumni students from the institution. In fact, Bill was actually on that board early on, which is how him and I kind of came to know each other and developed our relationship through that. It eventually became as an official, proposal to the board, and April of 2019, it was approved for us to begin competition for the following academic year, and it became a varsity level sport at that point. So we're actually a varsity sport. We report to athletics. We don't report to student affairs or it's not a club. So we chose to make it under athletics to kind of legitimize it, so those students would be seen as student athletes, so that they are subjected to all the rules of the student athletes as well, and they get kind of all the perks at the same time. So our students have to maintain a 2.5 GPA. They have to, we have study hours. We have all kinds of things that they kind of have to be relying on. And in fact, our team GPA was what, 3.2 this year?
3.2, 3.3,
like
yeah, it was
yeah,
pretty
something
decent.
there. So we're pretty excited about that, and we have a code of conduct that our team all agreed on. We sat down together as a team and had them kind of outline that and brought that together. So that's kind of how we came about and where we kind of sit in the hierarchy of the institution.
Well, that's awesome, because we have a lot of, there's I don't know how many other academic institutions like their esports programs you talk to on a regular basis, but there's a whole lot of variance as to how they're set up. Like I said, there's a ton of clubs. Some of them are under the comp sci, some of them are under student affairs. I saw one that was actually under the performing arts section of it. So there's a ton of difference out there. Now, do you feel as though being under the athletic department has given you any unique advantages or disadvantages in any way?
I'll take this one. I think there's a lot of unique advantages to being under the athletic department. One is that the athletic department they get a lot of resources in terms of we have strength and conditioning coaches, like full-time strength and conditioning coach for our athletic department. And we as an esports program also have access to that strength and conditioning coach. We have access to full-time athletic trainers, nutritionists. I mean, these are all things that we have the ability to utilize going forward. I mean, year one, it was very much, let's get competing, let's get kids here, let's get student athletes involved. And then, as we evolve, we can start utilizing those resources that we have, where we wouldn't necessarily have those if we were part of another program. So I think it's great once we start really utilizing those things.
Yeah, it does
Yeah,
seem like a lot of the schools that are under the athletic department really have a bit more resources in that form. Timothy, you were going to say something.
yeah, I would say the resources is a huge thing. The athletic director really helped buy into the program and got a lot of buy-in in the program, and kind of gave us some of the ability to create and design and develop a pretty competitive esports arena that allows us to really wow students when they come in, and increase recruitment potential for us. We were asked to recruit a certain number of students for this coming academic year for 2021, and we kind of knocked that out of the park in their mind, and allowed us, I think a lot of that revolves around the fact that they believe that much in us and provided us the space that allowed us to be able to grow into that. So we have, a great partnership with them to be able to do those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. So I guess this kind of leads me back around to Bill. You touched on the fact that you have nutritionists, trainers, everything that a student athlete would need to succeed. So how does the day of one of your student athletes look like? And more specifically, does it look like a typical student athlete in a traditional sport, or is it a little bit more tailored on the esports side? And also, how do you encourage those players to keep up with their studies and health and welfare outside of those practice times?
Yeah, so to kind of touch base on what you were saying with how does it compare to a normal athlete. So we have a lot of these resources, and we're looking at the best way to utilize them. So right now, our student athletes, it kind of, mimics the regular student athlete schedule, minus we probably don't lift as much as they would. So, I mean, just the way it is right now. So, I mean, a normal Arcadia esports athlete, wake up, go to classes. We have open hours as well. So if they want to get in and maybe warm up before practice in the afternoon, from 11 to 3, we have open hours. So if they have a break between class, they can come in, utilize that space. It's open to the entire student body, but a lot of the time it's the esports athletes trying to get some extra work in. They'll come in. I'm there pretty much all the time, so I'm a resource for them if they need the help. And then we'll go into practice in the afternoon. And then, after practice, it's, I'd imagine, hopefully homework time, because that's a great time to get some work done before bed. What I can say in terms of balancing academics, it's super important. I was a college athlete. I was a swimmer. I was also playing Hearthstone competitively, and I was, in college. And a lot of that time spent at night was time for me to, game and grind Hearthstone games. And I wish I had a practice time to kind of designate to say, this is my Hearthstone time. And it would have opened up a lot of time in the afternoon for homework. And we really try and stress that. And for our students that are kind of, if they have trouble balancing these things, they can meet with me, and we put together a full schedule of like, this is when you're going to study, this is when we're going to have practice. And if they're not able to keep up with that, then we take out the practice. You're not practicing, you're not competing, and so your grades are at a better level. And we haven't had to run into that too much, but it's totally, all of our coaches have an academic plan ready to pounce whenever we need it. So
yeah, we monitor and track academics throughout the course of the semester to make sure that students are on track, on point. We have academic monitoring in place so that, again, that our coaches are all on top of the students to make sure that they're doing what they need to do.
Yeah, and it's a lot of times what we see is if it's just in a club sense, or if it's not in a varsity sense, schools don't really have much of a power over their students to be able to be like, hey, you have to keep up with your academics, you have to keep up with your nutrition, you have to work out, such and such and such. And that's one of the big things that we're seeing come out of universities right now, is how important it is to have these programs integrated into the university itself, like from an organizational standpoint, rather than as a club, because those things are so important to esports athletes. I mean, I'm sure you too have seen it. If a student is not eating healthily, getting enough sleep, keeping a good work-life balance, that their performance probably starts to slip as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you see it day in and day out, like in any aspect of life. I mean, even if you go outside of the college setting and bring it to, professional gaming setting, even myself, if I'm having a bad day, if I'm not eating right, if I didn't get enough sleep, my win rate drops 3%. Like, actually, it's insane. Mm-hmm. Like, it'll actually tangibly drop. And that's something we try and stress for these players. And it's been tougher with the changes we've had to make to, COVID restrictions and things like that. But we're definitely try to be as welcoming and,
mm-hmm.
nurturing as possible to try and make sure that they're ready to go.
And how is the most recent global pandemic affecting you guys?
It hurt a little bit up front in terms of the competition, the availability for competition. But I think that's one of the things we were able to adapt to once that was kind of squared away. Once we were allowed to continue to compete, we were kind of lumped in. Well, all athletics can't compete, so we're not going to compete. But knowing that the esports world can continue on virtually, because that's what we do. We compete virtually. We're not competing in the same locations and stuff like that. So once organizations allowed that to continue to allow that to happen, and once we were allowed to continue to do that, we didn't really see too much of an ill effect, other than having things having to be postponed and pushed back a little bit just because of those time delays.
Mm-hmm. And I can imagine that the faculty behind, or it's like the board members, let's just say, are really happy that they still have some kind of intercollegiate competition that they can still kind of put the students behind and be like, hey, go watch these guys play their match on Twitch. It's going to be great. You still have someone to root for. Have you seen a noticeable uptick or downtick in viewers as a result of that, or student support, or has there really not been much of a change?
So for us, we haven't. So going into the fall, into the spring, we didn't capitalize super hard on our broadcasting and our Twitch channel and our things like that, because we really wanted to focus on making sure that everything else, we had all of our ducks in a row before we went live. Our space, I mean, you can see it in the background for 10 years. I think it's one of the top in the country. I'll go to bat for that. And I mean, really wanted, great. Yeah, it's amazing. I miss it so much, actually. I haven't been in months, so I miss it. But I really wanted, and I think we all wanted, our Twitch production, our Twitch broadcasting, our Twitch streams to match that value. And we see a lot of schools and this isn't, nothing bad against anything, but, they'll go live and it sounds like two kids talking through a walkie-talkie from 6 feet away. And it's like, this is our esports production, and we didn't want to do that. So over this summer and into the fall, we're working on putting together kind of a full broadcast team. And we're working with, the communications department and making sure that everything is super clean and super polished. So that's when we'll move more into we're streaming this now.
Yeah, we started in the spring with reaching out with our communication department, because we cross-curricularly, this is important. Like, we want to make sure our program ties in with other areas of the institution, right? Of other academic, aims. So our media communication department would be one of those ones that we were really working heavily with. And the goal was to try to get some stuff up in the spring. And obviously we wound up having to push that back. And that didn't happen with everything that kind of occurred. But the goal was to really have that up and ready to go for the fall. So we want to make sure that that's kind of all locked in for the fall.
Well, it's great that you guys are thinking ahead in that manner, because I've looked at a bunch of collegiate streams. I'm not going to name names here, but I've looked at a bunch of collegiate streams, and exactly like you said, Bill, it's like two people talking in walkie-talkies from 6 feet away. It just doesn't sound good. It doesn't look good, and it's great that you guys are putting in that initial effort. As a production manager myself, it's great that you guys are putting in that initial effort to make sure everything looks good, sounds good, feels good. And it's also great that you're wrapping in, as many different students and as many different departments into this as possible, because that's something that'll take your whole school and put them all behind you. And also, they'll be able to add something to their resume in the future if they go into any sort of broadcasting, say, oh yeah, I used to do this on my school's Twitch channel. It was really cool. You should check it out. And quite frankly, we really applaud you guys for doing that, just getting as many students in there as possible. I do kind of want to circle back here a little bit, though, because you talked about the fact that you guys do actually go out and do actual recruiting. This is something that's getting a lot more popular lately, is we see colleges going out and recruiting high school students, because as we all know, high school students, they can be amazing gamers and amazing esports athletes, even at the age of as young as, coming from a Rocket League background, 15. It's quite insane what some of these kids can do. So how do you really kind of appeal to the kids to say, hey, come to Arcadia? And then also, how do you kind of convince the parents to support their students going to school on an esports scholarship? Because I can imagine there's a lot of stigma there with the parents.
So I'll say one of the big things is just kind of the personalized communication that we offer. I know Bill is kind of tirelessly, out there communicating with parents. We send plenty of information out. I think one of our best features is getting them to campus so that they can see the space and see the commitment that we put into that. We wanted to make sure that the commitment was obvious from the get-go. But when that happens, when they come to campus, we have a kind of structured and routine in place that allows them to feel like they're not just there we're not just there to sell them on playing video games at a collegiate level. Like, we're there to sell them on an academic experience. It's not for us, it's not just about playing games. I mean, granted, we want to see competitive players come in. We want to see, we want to compete. We want to win, obviously, but we're looking to make sure that we have that kind of whole complete student come through. And I think parents are really appreciative of that. We schedule class visitations with our team members so that the student, when they come in, they're going to see an actual college class. So we're full on are recruiting them as a traditional athlete as opposed to just coming in and play a video game for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you wanted to kind of touch any more on that.
Yeah. So my favorite part, so we have these visits, campus visitation. They'll do a campus tour. They'll do, like Tim said, class visits. And then I'll actually offer, while the student is in classes, I'll offer like a sit down with just the parents, because a lot of the times it's the funniest part of the whole thing, because they'll sit down and they'll just be like, what is this, dude? Like, what is going on? Who are you? And then I get to have, a real conversation and say, I went to school here. I have a background in this, and, I really want to see this succeed. And they kind of see that we are invested in this, and that it's a real thing, and that we care about academics, and that we don't want their kid to just come to college and then play video games for 4 years and not learn anything. We're really keen on making this an all-encompassing experience. And I think the parents can see that we're genuine in that. And that's always the hardest part, is getting the parents to understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But once they have a conversation with someone who knows what's going on, it helps a lot. So it goes a long way.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've gone to a couple of events where we've met with high school students and their parents right there, and they come up to us because we bring a team or whatever to a local competition. I'll give a shout out to our Philly Esports friends that have set up some really great competitions that we've been a part of. We hosted one in February. It was kind of their last big event as well before the whole kind of lockdown occurred. But one in particular, I remember one of our current recruits that we're trying to get to come to Arcadia, we met with his parents at this event, and they had a lot of questions, and it was great, and they were so appreciative of me just spending time talking to them about the whole process, about what it involves, and about the fact that we are very dedicated to making sure that they are seen as true, student athletes, that with that student being first, that's very important to us.
Yeah, because we've heard a lot of, tons of horror stories about about parents, like, if you don't get them in the same room with you and sit them down and be like, hey, here's a 50 sheet slideshow of all the reasons why esports is good, why it's good for your kid if it's done correctly, and why it's an actual thing that's growing massively. And but we have seen that typically when schools are able to get parents into that room and have that conversation with them, very rarely are the parents so stigmatized at that point that they're like, no way is my kid going to school for esports. And I find that they're really supportive of esports once they actually know what it is. Now, how would you suggest that generally anybody, students, faculty, parents, it doesn't matter, how would you suggest that they go out and kind of teach other students, faculty, and parents about esports, and get them to recognize that this is an industry that's starting to take off massively, and that it is a huge future for a lot of students that are very talented at it?
Let me make sure I'm getting this the right way. So how does someone tell someone else about what esports is and how it's positive? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically more of like a parent or faculty side.
Okay. So I think that in order to kind of tell parents and faculty, the big thing is kind of break it down into ways that people understand. So I don't necessarily like to start with, like, this is what League of Legends is. It's a 5v5 multiplayer online battle arena. Like, none of those words make any sense, right? So, I think I consider Rocket League like the great bridging game.
Yes.
It's like it's a great way to bridge between like my mom God bless my mom. She's the sweetest lady ever, and she tries to understand what Hearthstone is to zero avail, but she supports me anyway. But like, I could show my mom Rocket League, and she'll understand. Oh, they're trying to score on each other. It's flying car soccer. And once you kind of show people the team aspect of that and how people can grow as teammates and people, it becomes a lot more legitimate. Once you can kind of relate it to things that people understand already and say, this is good, so that is good, it's kind of easier to do it that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rocket League is definitely one of the great bridging esports, like you said. It's one of the few things that to use an example that I've seen used around everywhere. It's someone that someone who can go to a sports bar and sit down and watch with his friends at the sports bar. Now keep in mind for younger viewers that's just a community thing, but it just take even that atmosphere out of it. And you can still go to a friend's house and watch a Rocket League game day the same as you would like a football game. That's something that a ton of people could feel like they could get into.
And kids of all ages can get into something like Rocket League. I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they're constantly playing Rocket League.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, keep playing it, man. I see potential scholarship opportunities erupting out of that. So like, keep it going,
Absolutely. So I kind of want to ask you, but I have 2 more questions for you. The first one is a question that we've asked pretty much every university that we've talked to. And it's a really hot button issue in collegiate esports right now. And that is, I'm going to say 4 letters to you and you're going to know exactly what I mean: NCAA. So do you feel as though the NCAA should get involved in esports, or do you feel as though we're doing well with other organizations, unifying bodies such as NACE, Collegiate Star, TESPA, et cetera, et cetera? There are a ton of them right now. Or do you feel as though we don't really need those governing bodies at all and we should leave it up to more of the conference side?
So I'll kind of start with this, and Bill, if you want to jump in after, but like, I don't see NCAA getting involved in this because it opens up Pandora's box, right? I mean, that's a huge thing that a lot of that's a huge thing that a lot of people are going to deal with, when it comes to paying athletes and things like that, because there's a lot of opportunity for esport athletes as it stands. So they don't really want to kind of get in the way of that. Governing bodies like NACE, we're a NACE member institution, and we I find tremendous value in what they offer, with the ability for creating competition and everything else. I think that's extremely important. I think that's going to continue. I think the biggest thing that kind of sets esports behind a little bit in that regard is that there is a lack of those kind of direct competitions in conferences and things like that. Like we compete against, everyone and anyone in between here, and we're in Pennsylvania and California. Like, I mean, everyone and everywhere. Like there's no kind of set competition. We are a member of ECAC as well, which is a conference that does, so that kind of allows us to have a little bit more close-knit competition. But there, and they did a great job this spring. And unfortunately, another season cut short with everything. But I think that's where you're going to see a lot of improvement once there's some ability to create those conferences and those divisions and those kind of rivalries that the NCAA is kind of famous for at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see them kind of stepping into that. I think, again, it's just Pandora's box, hornet's nest kind of territory.
Yeah. A lot of the big arguments we've heard is like amateurism. That's a big question in the esports scene, because students, I know collegiate streamers that make, $1,000, $2,000 a month just streaming, and that's basically what they do for a living. So is that still amateur? Is that a business? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you see things changing with the NCAA like every day now. Like apparently players can make money off their image and likeness and stuff. And maybe that's the beginning of the NCAA being like, okay, maybe we can get involved in this. I think eventually they're going to want their hands in it. But I think I'm not super like, I think I agree with Tim in the sense that an organized structure is really important for esports. And I'd love to see these rivalries start forming. But like we play USC Sumter tonight, all the way in California. It's like, it's a whole thing. We play them in a couple hours. It's like anywhere and everywhere. We're always ready to go. But like, it's it's going to be interesting to see what the NCAA does. Because I think eventually they're going to want their hands in it, but it's just going to be a matter of if they're willing to.
I mean, I'm sure the NCAA is going to want their hands in it. The question is, are they going to be able to do it under the current guidelines?
Right.
They're going to have to change something, I think. Mm-hmm. It's too established. I don't know. Who knows?
I think the hardest thing about the idea of esports within that is that, and this is what I was kind of going for when I was talking a little earlier, is just like there's a big difference between traditional sports and esports, right? Traditional sports, they schedule their competitions well in advance. They have, current schedules or schedules that they can rely on, and ours come out like the week of, and it's and that's where there's some issues that we want to kind of run into with, like, oh, well, who are you playing this week? Well, I'll find out on Monday, like, right? That's when the competition schedule is released, or that's when the seedings match up or whatever. And it's that's where you kind of get the divide between the traditional athletics and the esports of that.
Right.
I got something. I understand that tournament organizers love Swiss, and it's great for like competitive throughout.
Define tournament organizers.
So the leagues that we've been a part of, like a lot of them cater towards Swiss. And it's great because every week you're getting a good level of competition. If you're 0-2, you'll face someone that's 0-2. It's really nice. But for our sake, like from relaying to athletic standpoint, that answer of I don't know, we'll find out on Monday, like it's just tough to give every week. It's like not super. I think eventually like it'll have to switch to like a pre-release schedule, and then kind of like from there. I don't know when. I don't care. I'll keep playing Swiss, but giving that answer every week is kind of tough, for sustainability, I think.
That's an interesting point that you brought up that we haven't really heard from any of the universities, is that scheduling aspect, where I can imagine that there are a number of other challenges that you run into that are tangential to that, like marketing. How do you market like, hey, we're playing against somebody this week who, I don't know, it might be a rival, it might be someone else. We have no clue. Tune in on X day to see us play whoever. I can imagine it's horrible for marketing and stuff like that.
It looks so funny.
We could be playing, ABC University, which no one really knows about, or we could be playing UCLA, right? Which is a huge change in the optics of a potential match that people might want to tune in for.
Yeah.
We have scheduling on our board in the dining hall area, and it'll say all the athletics matchups for the week, and it'll be like, baseball versus this school, swimming versus this school, blah blah blah, and then it's just esports versus to be determined, because we just don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's just like we want to put that up there, and we want to right along with the other athletics, but it just looks silly when it's like 6 in a row. We don't even know.
Esports versus we don't know either.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, I don't know. Whoever steps up to play, we're playing them. Let's go.
So we're running into time here. I'd love to keep talking with you guys, but I have to leave you on one final question. And that is, if you were going to give any advice to a high school, middle school student who wants to propel and move into a career in esports, how would you suggest they go about starting that? And how would you suggest they go about defending that to those who might try to be, anti esports in general?
So I'll start. I can start with how they get involved. Like, to get your stuff out there. Start kind of broadcasting. Start where you can, recording your best matches, whatever you want to do, and get on sites like Be Recruited or things like that will get us information and get us that kind of understanding of where you're coming from. That's kind of how we get a lot of our student athletes. I mean, we get with some through just general understanding of, hey, I'm interested in Arcadia, but we get a lot through these sites like Be Recruited that are interested in playing, and that allows us to kind of see who they are and who they're what games they're involved in and things like that. So Bill, I don't know if you want to kind of touch a little bit more on the other part of that.
Yeah, so for me, the other part of that is really big too. If you have to be really like if you're pursuing this at a really high level, you have to be really focused on making sure that everything else in your life is also at that high level. Because if anything starts to slip, your parents, your friends that doubt you, they're going to start blaming the esports side of it. And you just can't give any reason for that excuse to exist. Like if you have a 3.9 GPA and you're working out every day and you're eating good and you're feeling good, but you're gaming a couple hours at night, no one can tell you, there's nothing wrong with that. But if something starts to slip, especially from us, if we see low GPAs, I'm importing people from, sites like BeRecruit, and if I see a low GPA, I'm out already. Because if you didn't make it in high school, it's going to be really tough to make it in college. So it's the same thing as any other sport. You got to keep it really balanced, and that's what's key. But also focus on everything.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming out and talking to us today and appearing on Spincast. Great to have you. Before you go, please, if you would kindly rep yourselves and rep Arcadia Esports, tell us where we can find you.
We are, I'm sorry, what, Bill?
Go, Tim, go.
ArcadiaKnights.com is our athletic website. That's one place you can go. You can find us on Twitter at Arcadia Esports.
Esports Arcadia. Come on, Tim.
Esports Arcadia and Instagram there as well. Those are the two big areas.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for appearing on Spincast, and thank you all so much for coming out and watching us. Just remember, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay plugged in.